the Awesemo NBA Deeper Dive Plus Live Before Lock. I'm Alex Baker, joined today by Ryan. Ryan, or as you guys know him better, Rinpack. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Mother's Day weekend, so we'll see how many people are actually playing NBA DFS seriously tonight.
I know, yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see like are people off their game a little bit, like hanging out with mom instead of making the right late swaps. So, uh, let's talk a little bit about yesterday, what we've been seeing in this late season NBA DFS because it's been kind of crazy. So, the big news yesterday was the Houston Rockets, who are on the slate again today, but they're down to 8 guys and then all of a sudden we got the news that DJ Augustine was getting the start. So what did you do?
So I'm really cautious about players coming back from lower body injuries and getting thrown in the midst of things. And I kind of was stayed away from that, unfortunately. And I missed out on a 3K starting player. I was pretty heavy on everyone else across the board. Armani Brooks was the real Houston stud, and along with Kelly Olynyk, who continues to crush. They all kind of finally got there for us. And again, a matchup against Milwaukee, all of them were kind of really good. And you could have mixed and matched your studs along. But the late night hammer was Bogdanovich of the Jazz, who came in there, put up a nice 48 piece with seven triples as there was a bunch of lineups towards him. He was sub 3% owned. And that team continues to play without Conley and Mitchell. And one of those guys really obliterated their price tag.
Yeah, that's crazy because I don't remember Bogdanovich really winning people GBPs all year long. So, like, it's interesting that this late season is working out for him. I thought you were going to say the late night hammer was Alex Caruso because at a certain point, I think they ruled out Talon Horton-Tucker. And I was like, oh, man, this is Caruso time. The only problem was all my spots for point guard were already locked. So did you end up getting any Caruso?
So I actually had some Caruso, and unfortunately, going to Caruso made me move away from Anthony Davis and move up to Luka, which was absolutely very, very tilting on my end. I was really excited to play Anthony Davis last night. I was way above the field on him, but I just didn't have enough of Bogdanovich with lineups with him. If you had both, and like the Houston value, you were sitting really pretty up top. The mixing and matching just didn't work out in my favor, but Anthony Davis came in sub 3% owned. Everyone was scared off that ankle injury, back spasms. But that, again, he shows when he's given the full run and he's healthy, he's one of the best fantasy players out there.
Definitely. That's going to be key for the Lakers heading into the playoffs here. And I saw a tweet from a guy in our community, Shrek4224. He had a 50K lineup last night. Caruso leading it off and AD. So that was kind of the key. It looks like he faded Houston completely. So, like, apparently my strategy of late swapping onto like 100% Houston guys like didn't really pan out. But it was funny. I was looking at the Draftkings app this morning, and I like fell asleep before the slate ended, and it was like cashed like 105 out of 150. And I was like, how did I lose half my money then? But apparently there's like a bug. I don't know. Have you noticed that?
Wow. No, I haven't noticed this bug. The DK team, the tech team needs to figure that out. The UI has been a bug. I didn't know that. I was running out of time, and I had to be well over the field on Najee Marshall and James Johnson. And I was just like, okay, I thought they were going to be good enough value. They ended up being very disappointing for a 10-game slate because other guys in that same price range in the Houston team really outplayed them. So DraftKings didn't work out for me. Fanduel was fine, but obviously I've said this as good results may look, they can always be better in DFS.
That's the glass half empty approach. I like it. Yeah, those New Orleans guys, it looked like Jackson Hayes was the guy to have last night, but a little tough to get to off the bench. So we got another chance tonight. We'll have to make sure we take advantage of it. Today, we're brought to you by our own Awesemo OddsShopper. Of course, like betting $100 to win like 150 is pretty cool. But if another book has you winning 160, like you're obviously losing a bunch of money by not taking advantage of the best odds. So instead of just looking at the lines on your sportsbook app, go to oddshopper.awesemo.com and make sure to see that you're getting the best lines in the industry. You're just going to make more money when you win those bets. So I always like winning more money instead of less money. I don't know about you, Impact.
Feel about the same way, yeah. And some exciting things about our OddsShopper. We have a new, obviously, we have the betting prop tool for you guys to check out, and we're going to be launching a tutorial video for those of you to make sure you guys use it correctly and effectively to make sure you win all the money you can.
Definitely. All right, so our first game tonight, we got Washington at Indiana. So this one's going to be a little bit tricky to break down right now because Indiana, they have just been like trying to trick people straight up with their injury report. It's like they have Malcolm Brogdon questionable every day. He's been ruled out for like weeks at this point. But on the other hand, Sabonis has come back from injury and been a fantasy monster, getting like 70 plus a couple times already. So the matchup versus Washington looks nice, but we don't really know who's playing with Sumner, Brogdon, and Lamb questionable. So what are your initial thoughts on this game?
So this matchup happened, I want to say, earlier in the week. It happened on the 3rd of May, so about 5 days ago. And in this particular matchup, Sabonis had one of those monster games of 70 plus, like you mentioned. He went for 74 and a quarter Draftkings points. I'll take that again. Obviously, that's very unrealistic to happen again, but the same matchup is going for him. And a lot of those people who game stacked this game with Russ and Sabonis really paid off for him that night. I was well over the field on Russ, but I was under the field on Sabonis because the first half. But the Indiana team, without Brogdon, we can go to some of these guys for sure, especially in a matchup versus Washington. I don't mind Levert at 8,600 and Levert at 9,100 on DraftKings is a tad too expensive.
Yeah, Levert at 9,100. You're going to really need a lot of stuff to go your way. He did play huge minutes in the last game, like 40 minutes. So if he could get that run again, then I guess he could be okay. But you're going to need both Sumner and Brogdon out potentially because that was the first time he even came close to that number. So now you mentioned how you've been a little hesitant to go for guys off of injury. It looks like Brogdon, he's kind of expensive on DraftKings at 9,300, on Fanduel at 8K. What are you going to do if he plays tonight?
It's going to come down to Nate Bjorken. He's missed an extended amount of time. I'm not sure if he's practiced. The team has not given any real updates with Brogdon's injury. So if he plays, I wouldn't be that interested. There's a lot of drama happening with this Pacers coaching staff. So who knows what's really happening. And I think I'll just take my chances elsewhere. This being the first game of the slate, I think potentially value opening up later in the night could happen. And there's a huge gap today between 7:30 Eastern and 4 games at 10 p.m. Eastern today. So it's going to be a huge gap. So I think I'll be okay completely being off of Malcolm Brogdon, even if he were to play.
Yeah, that's a good point that you want to save those roster spots for the later games, all things being equal, because we know these days a lot changes between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. So, or 7 and 10. All right. Anyway, so a few other names I'll mention from the Pacers, like O'Shea Brissett. He was on fire for what seemed like a week straight, but now that Sabonis is back, he's been a little bit less productive. I think everyone's off him at this point, but he's kind of expensive. I'm just mentioning him because I know this is a guy that's won people a lot of money. What are you thinking about Brissett?
Yeah, so if we look at Brissett's even box score, he's not played north of 30 minutes over the last 3 games. So the minutes are not there. You would love him to play north of 30 minutes at that price tag. Really tough for me to have any significant interest in Brissett. Obviously, he was a darling for us for that good 3-4 games when he was sub 5K. But obviously, Sabonis coming back into the picture. Now Goga Batadze is getting some minutes. I think Brissett is. I think you can definitely be off of Brissett today, and I'd be shocked if he ends up burning you at 6,400. He's just not been playing north of 30 minutes for him to really produce. He needed to play 40 plus minutes on most of those days, and his price tag is elevated. So definitely not someone I'm looking to on the Pacers side of things.
Yeah, same. He seems like the guy you'd want the last week of the NBA regular season, but not on this team right now. So, I'm a Tulsa dog, and chat said Rinpack's plutonium line vault is messing up the Wi-Fi. Oh man, is that a bomb shelter you got there? Anyway, on the Washington side, I saw Rishi in chat mention never fade Westbrook. Now, the fade was looking pretty good the last game, and then everyone who didn't have Westbrook, which is probably not many people to be fair, saw their winnings drop when the game went to overtime, and he got there. This time because of luck, I think. But the big guy that had a huge game was Robin Lopez. Like, that came pretty much out of nowhere. I don't think anyone had him that night. So that's a little frustrating because I feel like the centers on Washington, they run three guys, Alex Len, Rolo, and Gafford, and none of them seem to be reliable on a week to or a day-to-day basis. Let's start at center. Are you off these guys tonight?
Yeah, the center at Washington, it's like the New England running back situation. They just got 3 or 4 guys that seem to get a ton of minutes, and it's like Robin Lopez one night, Daniel Gafford the other night, Alex Len rises from the dead. Sometimes they go Hachimura at the 5, but it's so hard to pinpoint what's going to happen at that center spot. And the one thing that's going for those guys on over there on they're cheap, but they're not all that cheap. I mean, Lopez is 3,500 and Daniel Gafford 4,400 when he's getting minutes, and Len is 3,200. It's so hard to go there in confidence. Can you play center roulette with these guys? Sure, but it's not something that I would definitely support doing. They're all going to be very low owned. And if you are like building a bunch of lineups and you have some last men in, it's not the craziest thing. We've seen one of these guys obviously get there, but it's really hard to go there in confidence.
Definitely. It was a super fluke that Rolo got there. And I had a ton of Gafford one night. I think Corolla was out, and then they brought Anthony Gill in as the third center. So it's like,
yeah, you can never trust Scott Brooks. In the post-game conference after Daniel Gafford had that monster game, it was, I believe, against Milwaukee, it was against Milwaukee, and they asked Brooks, has Daniel Gafford earned more amount of minutes?
Yeah, you cut out there for a sec, but I think we got the drift there. So I think everyone in chat is talking about Westbrook. He seems to be pretty good on a points per dollar basis today at 11.1K on Draftkings and 12K on Fanduel. Now, the big question mark, I feel like there aren't a lot of great cheap plays tonight in DFS. So if you're putting Westbrook in your lineup, you're going to have some guys that might not look that good, at least initially. So how are you going to handle Westbrook today?
Yeah, so Westbrook, obviously, he's been tough. I've been under on Westbrook every single time he's been on this like absolute sensational tear, and it's burned me. There's only been one day where I was above him, and it was against this Indiana matchup, and that worked out. And he's 11-1 on DraftKings, and obviously he comes in at, I believe, 12,000 on FanDuel. He's getting, obviously, I still think underpriced for the production he's been obviously putting out. I think I'm going to be pretty above the field on Westbrook. The Indiana defense has been very, very bad since with all their injuries, and I think Westbrook should continue to eat. And just because even the slate size is over, I mean, the point total is pretty insane. I believe it's 248, something around there. It's pretty, I think it's the highest point total on the slate by 16 points. So that's quite a bit of points going to be scored in this game. And Russell Westbrook is going to do a lot of damage on the Washington side of things. So I really like Russ tonight. And I think it's going to be, based off on ownership, it's not going to take much. I do think that ownership is going to rise up until lock. And I think coming over the field with Westbrook, I believe there's enough value to get there tonight.
Okay, that's good to hear, because I'm sure Westbrook is the guy that everybody's looking for. So we'll have to talk about some of the value guys coming up here. Now, there are some cheaper guys on the Wizards. I will mention that Rui Hachimura is playing tonight. and that is going to cut into the minutes of some guys, but not guys we'd really want to roster in the first place. But two guys that have been a little bit cheap and successful have been Raul Neto and Ish Smith. Now, Neto has been starting, so he's been seeing his price climb to 4,800 on DraftKings and 5K on Fanduel. I think that might be a little bit too high, given, he's not a permanent monster exactly playing alongside Beal and Westbrook. So do you see yourself getting a Neto tonight?
Yeah. So Neto obviously coming off a great game in overtime last time out. $4,800 Neto over there on, I believe, on DraftKings. It's a little too expensive. He's going to be really low owned. There are a couple of guys in this game that are going to be good. I think I'd rather take my chances on a guy like Davis Bertans at 3,900. We saw he got up to 35 minutes in that overtime game. He's not been shooting as well from three as he used to, but I feel confident that he's going to play a handful of around 30 plus minutes potentially. And I, in a position over there on power forward where we have the roster too, I'd rather go to Bertans as the value side of Washington and 3,900 on DraftKings where you get the 3-point bonus than a guy like Neto today.
Yeah, Bertans does seem to be pretty cheap, and he's been playing decent minutes. Hachimura coming back, I don't think it will move the needle a ton because they have guys like Hutchinson and Gill that have been getting those minutes, so they're easy enough to find for both. Now, Ish Smith is notable because he's 3,300 on DraftKings. He's been playing about 20 minutes, 20 to 22 minutes in the past few games. But I feel like you're taking a risk if you pick Ish Smith because there could be better players that emerge after 6:30. So, what is your strategy with Ish tonight?
Yeah, Ish Smith is one of those guys. A lot of things have to go his way to really get there. Obviously, 20 minutes is okay. We've seen Ish Smith be productive in limited minutes before in his career, and even this year, he's all right. It's like not something that I'm excited at. The one thing that's going for him, he's a ball handler that can generate his own shot and get to the rack, but he needs like Russell Westbrook foul trouble. He needs a blowout. A lot of things for him to go get there for us. A lot of guys in Houston could be better. A lot of guys in Toronto could be better than Ish Smith, in my opinion. So seems a little far-fetched and coming under the field on a guy like Ish Smith, no issues there. But talking about Bradley Beal, for those who don't want to roster Westbrook, I recommend going to Beal just because this team has such concentrated usage between those two. And Bradley Beal has shown an upside, and I don't have any issues. If you want to fade Westbrook and play Beal, I think that's one way to get different tonight.
Nice. In this next game, Detroit at Philadelphia, this one is really tough because usually the Pistons come out and they're like, these following 8 guys aren't going to play tomorrow, but they have only ruled out Hamidou Diallo and Josh Jackson at this point. So, I don't think we're going to have to necessarily predict this one because we should get news since it's an early game. And this is one of the games at 7 p.m. But just for fun, what are you expecting the Pistons are going to do resting guys tonight?
So it's obviously the team is a lot easier to roster when guys are all missing. But I believe Jeremy Grant is going to return today, and that just like adds like a guy with a ton of usage back. Mason Plumlee could return today. I don't know why they're letting these guys come back and play. Let them just tank. This Piston team is pretty darn bad, and they're going to be all very low owned today. And a matchup against Philadelphia. If we get word Jeremy Grant's going to play full minutes, I'll have some interest there. But we've seen even when healthy, since like the second half, it's been he's kind of hit that wall. He was resurgent in that first half of the NBA season. He's not been the same. His price tag is low. Over there on Fanduel, $6,100 Jeremy Grant if he plays. Minimal interest there, but because he's shown an upside, if he can get there, I'd rather take my chances on a good player. And Mason Plumlee could get an extended amount of minutes. So if he finds his way to 30-plus minutes, he's fine. It's just Grant and Plumlee for me. The backcourt situation with everyone back is really tough for me to go there, but news could change this team in a hurry.
Definitely. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear some info during the show. So we might skip this one for now and circle back. But Grant on FanDuel, I agree. His price looks pretty enticing there. Uh, and then the guards, it's like pretty much impossible to know who's going to play tonight. But I do feel like Corey Joseph, he's more successful playing point, and Killian Hayes is most likely going to be back for this game. So if Kojo plays, it's going to be more at the 2. So does that make you feel less excited about Corey Joseph?
Yeah, and I think that price tag is elevated, and there's a lot of other value that could open up on the other side of this game and games that start later tonight. So as we head over to the Philadelphia side of things, those 3 studs are all questionable. We'll see what Doc Rivers ends up doing. And Malcolm Brogdon was ruled out, so news is just trickling in right now for the Pacers. As Jeremy Lamb is also ruled out, so Sabonis still a solid play, and Levert minimal tournament interest on immediate thoughts for the Pacers.
Nice, yeah. Sumner is in, so I think that's significant too. So when I did take these guys out, I noticed that the projection for Sabonis went up a good amount because obviously he's going to have to do a lot more with Brogdon out. And then I think Levert is kind of interesting, but I don't expect him to play as many minutes last game because Sumner is back. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good point. Sumner also someone who's going to take away from some ball handling duty, some usage. His price tag is low enough where I'll have some interest. He didn't miss enough time for me to be a little shied away, but his price tag is cheap enough where in that type of game environment, there are ways where he can pay that off.
So I think the last game, Doug McDermott got the start, right? So who are you expecting to start tonight for the Pacers now that Sumner's back?
So I think Sumner will enter the starting lineup again. So probably go Sumner, Levert, Sabonis for sure. And then what they do, the other parts of the lineup.
I think they started Aaron Holiday last game, so I think he just moves back to the bench.
Yeah, I think it was just Sumner replacing Aaron Holiday in that starting lineup.
Yeah. So now Doug McDermott played a lot of minutes last game, like 30. If he plays that many again today, he's only 4,200, so he would really stand out as a good option. And he's been getting, on average, about 27 to 28 minutes over the last 5 games. What are you thinking about McDermott?
Yeah, McDermott's someone obviously not known for his craziest fantasy upside, but at those minutes, he's taken double-digit shots 2 of the last 3 games, actually 3 of the last 4. And I don't mind it, especially DraftKings where you can get the 3-point bonus for him, and Fanduel where we have to roster 2 of his position. Don't have any issues there. I do feel kind of confident that he can find a way to 30-plus minutes tonight. $4,400 on the power forward Fanduel position. So it's not going to take much to get over the field on a guy like McDermott tonight.
Nice. Yeah, I feel he looks like a pretty enticing value play at this point. Just updated the projections, so if you're following along on those, make sure to refresh. Now, this next team, Philadelphia, we have Simmons, Embiid, and Seth Curry questionable. And we just got the 4:30 injury report for them that said that they're still questionable. So there was no news on that. So this is another one we'll have before lock. So are you just not going to build any lineups before we get this news about Embiid, Curry, and Simmons?
Yeah, just because this is huge news, right? There could be so many different permutations and combinations for Embiid, Simmons, and Curry to sit. So even if one of them is ruled out, I mean, if Embiid's ruled out, obviously immediate interest in Simmons and Harris and Dwight Howard, that would go to my mind. Now, if both of those guys are out, Embiid and Simmons, Tobias Harris becomes an outstanding play in this situation, as well as guys like even Shake Milton and Dwight Howard. So there's a lot of different possibilities that can happen, and we need that news to make sure we can get the right amount of exposures to the right guys. And I really hope it comes out. I hope it comes out at least a few minutes before. So like around, give us like 2 minutes, Stock Rivers. Unlike, I hate it. It'll be terrible if it comes out after lock.
Yeah, I think that this is one where usually we get this news about 30 minutes ahead of time. So I don't want to speculate too much about what's going to happen, but we will be going all the way into locks. So we'll have you covered with who that is going to make a good play.
Philly was on a back-to-back last night, and it was a close game against the Pelicans team. So do with what you want with that information, but it's a back-to-back for those guys.
And they are playing Detroit, so like pretty much whoever's in, they're going to be a favorite here.
For sure.
So maybe more incentive to rest guys. Guys, so YouTube's not the only place that we go live every day. One of our platforms is podcast. Go to awesemo.com/podcast, and you can get all of our non-live before lock shows. So the strategy show, the process, etc. And we also have a weekly giveaway where we give a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum to one person who's left a 5-star review. So make sure to drop a review on there. Also, with playoffs coming up, I know, Ryan, you've crushed playoffs at least last year. So the fun doesn't stop after Sunday this next week. So we got a lot of content coming for that. Our weekly package is $16.95 for NBA and $29.95 for all of the sports. So Rimpak, I'll throw this to you. Like, what is your general approach for the playoffs, just to give people a taste?
Yeah, so playoffs are not everything really changes. Rotations do stay somewhat similar. We see more enhanced minutes for the starters, and depending on the matchups, what coaches do. Coaches tend to sometimes have short leashes. We've seen over the years how coaches change up their rotations in the playoffs just because things aren't working out. It's just trying to be on top of that news. Sometimes watching the games do definitely help in the playoffs to see what these guys on TV are saying in their coaching interview meetings. Press conferences are going to be really important to be on top of. And obviously just having the rotations and minutes a lot of times can lead you in the right path. And the Showdown contests get a lot bigger in the playoffs as well. And those can be, there's quite a bit of edge there in the playoffs as well. It's also just a different type of news. It's not like in or out news. It's about rotation news, what you might expect, and kind of take advantage of that because it's going to be the same matchup for a whole series. Things can change in that series, but a lot of things still stay the same. And it's going to get really tilting when guys get hot in the series and you're going to be like, nah, that can't sustain. Like last year in the first round, we saw Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray just go back and forth. And where you have to make those decisions based off ownership, make it really, really tough.
Yeah, that was wild last year with Murray kind of being an emerging star in the playoffs. Yeah, and Showdown has been awesome for that. I did have an interesting finding on one of the game plan videos that I was doing Showdown for NBA, and I found that if you pick a contrarian captain, like it pretty much didn't matter what captain you had, like whether they're low or high owned, as far as the average number of duplicated lineups with each lineup, with each captain. So it's like, if you think you're getting sneaky by picking Crusoe a captain, like it actually like didn't make a difference. So that was kind of interesting. Let's talk a lot more.
So it's a very Showdown single game NBA I've been playing it since they first launched it. And that I was kind of ahead of it. There were times where I could run 10 lineup trains and be fine with everything. Now it's people have gotten a lot smarter and it's a lot harder to get different. And sometimes I don't know where you draw the line in terms of dupes and winning dupes, but there are a lot of times it's very rare you'll see solo Showdown wins, unless if you're Dr. Carl, whoever Dr. Carl is, he's the king of single game Showdown slates as he wins solo a lot of times. So.
Damn, man, we gotta get this guy on Awesemo. Anyway, I think I've seen him in the chat. Dr. Carl's very familiar. All right, let's go to the next game because we do have a lot more to get through here. Memphis at Toronto. So On the Memphis side, yeah, like we've been pretty lucky with this team to not have a lot of moving pieces from day to day. The only thing I see on their injury report with Grayson Allen out, they started Desmond Bane and got John Contra got some minutes off the bench. I think people will play Jaren Jackson. He's been kind of coming back to form a little bit, playing 24 minutes the last game. But without much injuries for the Grizzlies, it's a little hard to get excited about any of the options. What are you seeing here?
So this is an interesting game, Memphis versus Toronto. So right now we're about 5 games on average, 4 or 5 games for most teams before the regular season ends, and then followed by the play-in game. So Memphis is in the midst of the play-in game seeding, and I've seen what their coach has done is elevate some of their minutes for their starters. Guys like John Moran is now playing 36, 37 minutes more consistently over the past few games as they need to rack up some wins. Dylan Brooks is someone who's always played a handful of minutes, barring any foul trouble or blowouts. He's played 35 minutes to 2 of the last 3. So to factor in motivation and wins in the last week of the regular season is something that I kind of consider. It's tough to always measure that analytically, but sometimes giving some of their better players an extra few minutes here and there could be the difference of like someone becoming an average play and a good play. So guys like John Morant are standing out to me just because he's playing a handful of minutes and he's playing against a pretty bad Toronto team of late. So over there on FanDuel, that $7,100 price tag, I like quite a bit. And the field seems to like it quite a bit. And I think going over the field on John Moran over there in FanDuel is something that I'm going to consider doing today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. He's a lot cheaper on FanDuel at 7,100 than DraftKings at 84. So I think it's going to be a lot different based on what site you're playing for them. I agree. Yeah, it looks like his minutes have been up. We have him for 35 minutes today. His season average is 32. So I think a little bit extra bonus there. Okay, we got the news. Rui Hachimura is on a minutes limit today. Not that we were on him in the first place, but at least interesting to note. What about the other Memphis guys? Do you see anyone popping out besides John Morant?
So obviously with the Grayson Allen situation, they've been rotating that other guard position, guys like Desmond Bane, DeAnthony Melton, and it's been tough to pinpoint them in confidence. There was a game where Melton played more minutes. There's been a game where Bane plays more minutes. So it's tough to go there in any sort of confidence. And in a matchup versus Toronto, I think if you want to go to the cheaper guy out of Bane and Melton, which would be Melton over there on DraftKings, over there on FanDuel, I believe Bane is 4,800 while DeAnthony Melton is 3,600. So Melton is the cheaper guy on both sites. And Melton over there on FanDuel, he's shown his steals upside. It's just that I feel like there's better value in the later games and potentially in the Philadelphia side of things. So it's honestly going to be John Moran over there on FanDuel and maybe Valanciunas versus Toronto. If for some reason, if this he finds a way to play mid-30s minutes in this type of matchup, not saying it's a matchup that I would expect him to do that, but he's shown an upside of being a great fantasy point monster. And one of the things is he was really sad when he was traded away from Toronto. And there are some games, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but he's played pretty well against Toronto in the past in his career. So not to say that there's some revenge still in his heart, but there might be.
Revenge always gets me pretty excited to play a guy in fantasy. So you have my interest here. We did get some news. Ty Jerome is out today. I don't think it's really huge, but we'll talk about that when we get to the game. On the Toronto side, we have Van Vliet out for this one, in addition to Lowry and Anunoby, who've been out, as well as Boucher. And I don't know if you saw this, Ryan, but Aaron Baines is doubtful now. That's definitely a hit for the the Raptors here. But anyway, with all these guys out, I think we might have some value here. What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, Nick Nurse thinks that Aaron Baines is a doubtful NBA player, as Baines has not seen the court in forever at this point. We got news Jeremy Grant will play today. So that is one thing that just throwing that out there. But talking about the Toronto side of things, these guys are really intriguing. One thing about Nick Nurse is he's going to let those guys play a ton of minutes. Those starters are going to play a lot of minutes. Last time, Stanley Johnson was in the starting lineup with Van Vliet and Gary Trent Jr. returning from injury, Siakam and Kem Birch. So Malachi Flynn was not in the starting lineup last time. So it's going to be really important to pay attention to see what they do with the starting lineup. And we saw Malachi Flynn. He was when he was in the starting lineup, he was playing a handful of 30+ minutes last 3 games. He hasn't gotten there for us. So that's going to be interesting to see what that final ownership comes in at. And dictating based on that starting lineup is what I'm going to make my decision with him. I think right now I'd be taking my chances to be under the field on a guy like Malachi Flynn, taking up a point guard spot. I think there are better options on both sides. While Gary Trent Jr. over there on Fanduel playing the shooting guard position, yeah, I don't mind him. I don't expect him to continue to shoot 50% from the field, but at 5K at the shooting guard spot, there are a lot of ways for him to be really good. So I think being with the field with Gary Trent Jr. over there on Fanduel makes a lot of sense. DraftKings 5,500, where you get the 3-point bonus, it's an okay play. Nothing not as good as it is over there on Fanduel. But a lot of these Toronto guys are going to be good. And Siakam on the other side of things, I think is a fine option to consider. Now, I completely botched the Malachi Flynn situation. I missed on my sheet that Van Vliet is also out, I believe. So
Yeah.
Malachi Flynn is an exceptional play right now. So I backtrack on what I just said. So Malachi Flynn is a great play on both sides. So I expect him to play 30+ minutes. And pardon me for that mistake.
Oh, yeah. Flynn, I think, is one of the better plays of the slate. With Van Vliet out, they really are short on the point guard depth, and he's really gotten the run when these guys have been out, even when one of the two have been out, along with Trent. So we had a few games like that before. But yeah, he got like 30+ in those games. So looking pretty good today. Now, Gary Trent, he came back from injury last game and got to start. Didn't play huge minutes, but I'm kind of wondering, like, will he get huge minutes now that he's 1 game removed from this injury? Is he someone that's on your radar?
So on the Raptors broadcast, I was watching it against Milwaukee last time, and they indicated that Nick Nurse said Gary Trent Jr. will play with no minutes limit. So
Nice.
I take that word. I take that word really, really to heart. So I'll take that yet again. So I don't mind Gary Trent Jr. today at all.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good to know because okay. We just got the news that Killian Hayes is in. I think we just are expecting that. Anyway, Office Ninja 87 in our Slack said thoughts on Bembry as a value play.
DeAndre Bembry is a value play. So if this guy enters the starting lineup, I'll have a lot more interest in him. $3,500 over there on DraftKings. Over there in Fanduel, $3,800. If he's starting, I'll definitely have more interest in him for sure. So not a priority Raptor like guys like Malachi Flynn and Gary Trent Jr., even Kem Birch, who's going to play a lot of minutes in a Valanciunas matchup, in my opinion. So I think he's like a secondary tier of Raptors. It's not like Nurse is going to have a ton of guys to play, but if he's starting, I think we can have definitely elevated interest in Bembry.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to get to start, but like Stanley Johnson, he's been getting a ton of minutes, but like he fouled out of the game last game and had a really terrible fantasy performance while we all had him. So it wouldn't be the most shocking thing if they changed the starting lineup. But talking about Stanley, he's 3,700 on DraftKings. Do you expect him to continue getting the minutes like he has been the last 3 games?
Yeah, I think just because this team is undermanned, I don't see guys like Jalen Harris or Rodney Hood getting those minutes from him. So, yeah, it's Stan Johnson at that price tag. I think he's going to have some ownership. So, I'm going to be very cautious what I do with Stanley Johnson. He's not fun in terms of fantasy perspective at times, but he's cheap enough where it helps to jam in some of those studs that we're going to talk about in these 4:10 p.m. games.
Definitely. We got to get through these games pretty quick because apparently I've been chatting too much. Anyway, Brooklyn at Denver. I'm not seeing a ton here at the moment because Irving and Durant are both in and they're priced up super high. What are you seeing at Brooklyn?
Yeah, they're priced up quite a bit. Obviously, Kyrie Irving was sensational last time out. I think over there on Fanduel, where Durant is a small forward, if there's enough value to roster two, one of those two guys obviously have tournament winning upside. So having a little bit of shares, if you're building a lot of lineups, I won't fault you there. But no one else on the Brooklyn side of things is exciting. They did start Blake Griffin last time. He did find a way to 27 minutes. He is 5K in a matchup versus Denver. We'll see if they start DeAndre Jordan for a Jokic matchup, but that front court is in very it's a lot of uncertainty in that front court situation. But short story on the Brooklyn side of things, Kyrie and Durant are expensive, but they have huge upside.
Definitely. Maybe some contrarian flyers there on Denver. One of the questions I have for you is Millsap is kind of a popular play tonight, but it's a back-to-back, and I'm really worried that he might not get the minutes or might not even play in this game. But if he's in the starting lineup, I think you can take some shots, but I'm still not like overly excited about him. But he's so cheap on DraftKings at 3,800 and FanDuel at 3,900. What are your thoughts on Millsap?
Yeah, Millsap is coming in pretty cheap, and at that price tag, I'm trying to see when's the last time he played on a back-to-back. He played on them back-to-back on April 28th and April 29th, 19 and 17 minutes. Obviously, they've lost some bodies since then in PJ Dozier. So he's been entering the starting lineup. I think I'm not that excited in Paul Millsap. I know there was a stretch where he's coming off the bench and was an excellent late night play, but on a main slate of this size, I think I'd be willing to take my chances elsewhere.
Jokic has been a guy that's been doing it all season, firmly in the lead for MVP. How does he stack up for you on tonight's slate?
Yeah, anytime Jokic is on that slate, especially on the FanDuel or on the center spot where you can only roster one, there's some value that's I feel like is going to open up tonight. We can definitely go to Jokic on both sides. No issues there. In a matchup versus Brooklyn where he should definitely eat and do whatever he wants. I expect the minutes definitely to be there. I definitely have a lot of interest in Nikola Jokic. Obviously, it's tough to get in all the studs you want, but there is some significant value that's going to open up where you can mix and match with some of the studs and Russ, Sabonis, and Jokic. And I really like Jokic in this matchup for sure. And one thing that was really interesting last night, we saw Aaron Gordon play 30 minutes. And that's really exciting for Aaron Gordon because he had not played 30 minutes as a member of the Nuggets, I think, since his opening day as a Nuggets player. So 30 minutes of Aaron Gordon in this matchup, I like quite a bit. He's going to have some ownership, but I think I'm going to be well over the field on Aaron Gordon tonight.
Yeah, Gordon on FanDuel is a lot cheaper than DraftKings, so he's standing out there. Now, Oklahoma at Golden State. Usually with OKC, we get a lot of guys out. However, this game, we got the news that Ty Jerome is out. Pokashevsky is remaining out. But beyond that, Lou Dort is questionable, so we don't really know who's going to really be getting the minutes outside of the usual guys, Baisley, Roby, Maladon, and Moses Brown. So I'm not seeing a ton of interesting plays on Oklahoma City at the moment, but this is something that could change in a heartbeat. So what are you thinking with the Thunder?
I've hated to roster the Thunder over the last a week or so. They've been not fun just because I feel like all their minutes are like Mark Dagnall picks up like random minutes for all these guys and really tough to pinpoint them in confidence. Also, I forgot to mention Austin Rivers, 4,100. He played around 28 minutes last game. He's been playing high 20s minutes. I think he's a pretty solid value play. But back to Oklahoma City side of things, no one is even like priced to a point where I'll have significant amount of interest. Everyone seems priced appropriately. With no Ty Jerome, maybe Svi Mikhailiuk gets more minutes. We've seen him have an upside. He's the min. But honestly, outside of that, Moses Brown had seen some minutes rise, 28 and 30 minutes. So that's okay. But as you can hear in my voice, it's not something I'm really excited to go to today. Maybe Lou Dort at 5,100 where we have to roster two small forwards, but I'm not sure if he's going to even play. So it's really tough to go to these OKC guys in any sort of significant confidence. And it's not going to take much to get over the field today in a matchup versus Golden State, but even then, that seems a little too much for my liking.
Yeah, I find it difficult to get to these guys as well. Moses Brown is a little bit cheap on FanDuel, but besides that, nothing too exciting. Or Roby is a valid value play because he's been getting pretty good minutes. Now on Golden State, Kelly Oubre remains out, so I mean, Wiggins is getting a lot of minutes, as well as Draymond Green. And Steph Curry is leading the NBA in scoring. Obviously, a great player. So, how are you prioritizing these guys today?
Yeah, obviously, this Golden State team played Oklahoma City. They've played them a couple of times over the past couple of weeks. And one of the games they won by, I want to say 38, and last time they won by did they win by? Yeah, they won by 21. So they put a beating on this Oklahoma City team, as many teams have been doing of late. Yeah, Steph Curry could score 60 real life points in 3 quarters against his team, and it wouldn't shock me. Where you get the 3-point bonus over there on DraftKings 10-8, you're saving $200 off of Russ Westbrook. On a slate of this size, the opportunity cost of Russ Westbrook is so scary if missing out on an 80-point game from him in a matchup where Washington they continue to need to win, while Golden State also needs to win to avoid falling out of the play-in game. But I like going to Curry in a pure tournament option. It doesn't. I'm going to have a little bit of him just coming in a little under the field potentially, but other guys in this game, Draymond Green has a huge upside for Golden State. No real significant interest. I think Kent Bazemore now is finally priced appropriately, 5,700, 5,500. But honestly, that's about it. Curry and Draymond, followed by Wiggins for me.
Nice. Yeah, I think Curry stands out on FanDuel more than DraftKings because of Westbrook, as you're saying, where on FanDuel you're getting an $1,800 discount. On DraftKings is like $200. So big difference there. Kevon Looney's kind of jumping out as a value play, but not a guy that's particularly exciting in fantasy. We got a couple more games, but I gotta mention, if you're not following us on Awesemo NBA, make sure to go over to Twitter and follow us. We got the one and only news god giving out all the updates, and he's also on our premium Slack in the Breaking NBA News channel. That's really essential if you're playing NBA on a nightly basis, because you'll get those notifications right to your phone. And because it says Slack, I mean, maybe your significant others will think you're working and not switching your DFS lineups. So that definitely makes things a lot easier. So make sure to thank News God for all the help there. All right, San Antonio at Portland. Now San Antonio, they're on the back-to-back, so I'm kind of wondering if there could be some shenanigans. This is definitely a game that I feel like starting at 10 p.m. could easily have someone resting in between lock and when it tips off. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, San Antonio team on a back-to-back got a huge win over Sacramento last night. As Sacramento is inching towards the play-in game, San Antonio has the 10th spot in the West. So with that in mind, obviously – this team needs to win, continues to win to like secure their spot in the play-in game. I'm inclining towards Popovich rolls these guys out, as he probably wants to win as a competitive player, but it's a play-in game. So it's obviously, we don't know what he's going to do. We don't have much news on that situation at all, but both of these teams need to win because Portland doesn't want to be in the play-in game, as they beat the Lakers last night, as they're the 6th seed and they continue to want to win. So there's a lot of seeding implications in this game. So I'm inclined towards we're going to get an all systems go type of matchup. But looking at the price tags up for San Antonio, honestly, in a matchup versus Portland, I should be having more interest in guys like probably Jakob Poeltl, who's going to have to be out on the court for a lot more minutes, I think, than usual with the matchup versus Nurkic and Cantor. We've seen him do pretty well. Rudy Gay has been getting some extra minutes in a couple games. He's playing 23 and then 23 minutes. Actually, I take that back. Not that many extra minutes. 4K at DraftKings. It's an okay price tag. But we saw Lonnie Walker enter the starting lineup last night, and he played 33 minutes. Took 14 shot attempts while he was on the court. So they won the game. I'm assuming Lonnie Walker is going to get the start again over Devin Vassell. So Is it Vessel or Vassal? I'm not sure, but Lonnie Walker makes for an intriguing low on value play in my opinion. But in terms of studs, DeMar DeRozan 8,500. No issues paying up for DeMar DeRozan tonight.
Nice. Yeah, Lonnie Walker is kind of interesting because he did get the start last night, and the fact that they won the game definitely doesn't hurt. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that again tonight. He's affordable, but his price has climbed a little bit. We did get the news that Yuta Watanabe is in today. I don't really think that significantly affects anyone on Toronto in particular. What do you think?
Yeah, because obviously they're playing with Huff and Vliet. There's a chance maybe Watanabe could draw the start. So that might obviously make Watanabe more intriguing. But just keep an eye out for that starting lineup situation. So Watanabe did start the game against the Clippers when Lowry missed, I believe. If I'm not, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so pardon me if I'm wrong here. But Watanabe is an okay play if he plays, and I think he's a pretty solid play if he starts.
Definitely. I do notice that Stanley Johnson did play big minutes with Watanabe in the lineup the last 2 games before this most recent one. So not really worried if you're on Johnson there, but not a fun guy to pick in DFS in the first place. Now, Keldon Johnson is a guy that it seems like he's been cold for a while, but he's kind of cheap. Any interest there?
He's one of those guys. He's like an ultimate tournament player because there's some games where he puts up 13, 14 rebounds. Over there in Fanduel, where we have the roster too, I'll have more interest in a guy like Keldon Johnson at that small forward position. But honestly, that's really about it in the Spurs situation. Big asterisk with Greg Popovich on a back-to-back.
On Portland, we've been seeing condensed rotations with Lillard and McCollum playing close to 40 minutes in competitive games. Now, Carmelo Anthony is out for this one. So coming off the bench, I think that we just see maybe Derek Jones re-enter the rotation. So I don't think that really affects anyone. And to be honest, I'm not seeing a ton of DFS value, except Lillard and McCollum are a little bit cheap on FanDuel. What do you see?
Yeah, over there on FanDuel, they are pretty cheap. And Damian Lillard obviously had an upside last game out at that price tag. This team continues needs to win. We're seeing Terry Stotts roll out the minutes. I don't mind them. Keep in mind with what they do with Nurkic on a back-to-back. So there might be a potential Enes Kanter starting if Nurkic doesn't play on a back-to-back, and where Kanter becomes an exceptional value play. So this 10 p.m., 4 10 p.m. games on this Mother's Day Eve is going to be a crazy late swapping affair.
Oh man, yeah. All the moms are gonna be pissed that we're all looking at our phones tonight.
That happens every night. It's all good. So
well, yeah, but usually my mom's not there. Anyway, the last game we got is pretty interesting. So let's take some time to discuss this one. Houston at Utah. Now, Jayshawn Tate and Kelly Olynyk are questionable tonight. The guys that have been ruled out include Avery Bradley, Kevin Porter Jr., and Christian Wood, and DJ Wilson. So we do have a very depleted Rockets team. But with Tate and Olynyk questionable, those are probably like their 2 best players. So what are you making of this injury situation?
We got to wait for the news. It's tough just because obviously limited bodies. A guy in Kyrie Thomas, I believe, I don't know if he's in the player pool, but was played at around teens minutes last night. So there's another player that they do have in Kyrie Thomas who is playing some minutes for the Houston team that is not in either player pool, if I'm not mistaken. So keep that in mind. But if Olynyk, someone who was questionable yesterday and did play, he's been playing great for this Houston team. Obviously, probably their best player when healthy. He's been great in terms of fantasy wise. Last 3 games, honestly, has been sensational. Now, matchup versus Utah, I expect him to play quite a bit of minutes, so I don't mind that. Jayshawn Tate didn't play last night. We'll see what those minutes look like, even if he plays. He seems a little too expensive for someone coming off a knee tendonitis injury. But I still think KJ Martin continues to get those minutes. So I like KJ Martin, 5,300. He's been really, really good in terms of fantasy wise and really athletic player as well. 6 to 10 from 3-point field last night is unsustainable, but I do think those minutes in the high 30s, I do think still continue for him. On the backcourt situation, Augustine obviously found his way to 29 minutes, was pretty good, up to 3,700. We'll see what happens there. But Daquan Jeffries played a lot of minutes. He's not a really good fantasy producer. I think Anthony Lamb, I prefer to Daquan Jeffries, someone who takes a more active role in the offense, and those minutes are there. Now, if Olynyk is out, potentially Daniel House continues to play more minutes. He only played 16 minutes. A lot of what ifs in the situation where news can, even with one guy being in, will change a lot for this Houston rotation, in my opinion. But I think we can go there in safely to guys like Anthony Lamb, KJ Martin, and Armani Brooks. I think those guys are in store for 30 minutes at least in the minimum.
Yeah, I think Jae'Sean Tate being back for this one is going to move some pieces around. So I'm a little bit less confident in some of the guys. But okay, so KJ Martin, I agree. I think he's like probably the safest option. Just playing crazy minutes, really young, and he doesn't have anyone that plays his position. So I think he's safe. DJ Augustine, this is a if he starts only for me because I'm a little bit worried that on the back-to-back, he's a little bit older, although not being like 7 feet tall makes it a little bit easier to recover on the back-to-backs, I'm sure. But still, if he's not starting, I don't have any confidence in the minutes. So the only problem is he's super cheap, so everyone's going to be on him. Do you think it makes sense to lock him in a roster spot and then late swap off if he's not starting?
Yeah, I think that's one way to do it. So I think you can think that you'll have enough salary flexibility. I mean, 57% of the slate starts at 10 p.m. So organically, I think you'll have a lot of flexibility going into that 10 p.m. games. It's not the craziest idea, and that has worked out. And some days it's not going to work out. It's just the nature of how things go.
Definitely. Let's talk about the Jazz now. So Utah, I think the big guy last night, you were saying Bogdanovich had a killer game. So, but Conley, Mitchell remain out. So I think we pretty much have 5 guys that are playing all the minutes, or 6 guys. Not a lot changing day to day here. So I think Clarkson and George Niang have the best prices on Draftkings. We're on Fanduel. All 6 guys seem pretty well priced. So I'm comfortable with any of them. Is there any particular guy standing out to you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we know Quinn Snyder runs a tight rotation, and I have quite a bit of interest in these guys. And just because of that tight rotation, Jordan Clarkson, someone who has been really good the last 2 games out, kind of overshadowed by Bogdanovich's performance yesterday, but took 20 shot attempts. Obviously priced up at 7,600 and 7,300 over there on FanDuel. But I think being above on a tight rotation against this Houston team, I won't fault you. I think Bogdanovich is going to be significantly owned after that monster game last night. If you want to pivot to by paying 700 more to Ingles, it's not it's a good way to kind of differentiate yourself in large field tournaments. But Rudy Gobert 8,200 is I think an exceptional save down pivot off of Jokic in this Houston matchup. I know he's been kind of disappointing, but I do think he has a huge upside with blocks against this Houston team. Last time he played Houston in 26 minutes, put up 46 fantasy points. So obviously this Houston team's a lot different since then, but he's someone who can really be a monster in less than 30 minutes against this Houston team. But a lot of really good options in this Utah side of things. Tough for me to really grade him out. I think in terms of ownership, I'd be shying away a guy who dropped 48 real life points last night, but that's honestly about it.
Yeah, I don't know if you can repeat it, to be honest. That seems a little fluky. All right, we got a super chat here from Aid. Thanks, Aid. He's saying, what's the most Rockets guys you will be playing tonight? So I think he's asking the number of guys that we would consider playing. I think right now, if everyone plays, maybe 2 or 3 but I don't think anyone's like a lock. But if Olynyk and Tate are out, then all bets are off, and maybe playing 4 is an option. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm especially in late season NBA DFS. Uh, I don't think you ever want to limit yourself like that just because of the news that's pending, and that can really burn you. For example, it burned me last night. I ended up just locking in Najee Marshall and James Johnson, and that's the reason why I didn't have a better night. So that's a lesson learned on my end where I made that mistake. So I think going, just keeping your options open, waiting for that news to put yourself in the best position to be optimal is the best way to approach it. I know those rules and everything are very enticing to put in place, but be cautious, especially with this late season NBA DFS. And this goes to a Slack question we got earlier. I forget who asked it, but it was Larry C. He asked, would you set a min number of players for your late games on FC tonight? I personally wouldn't. I think organically you'll have a lot of flexibility with 57% of the slate, like I said, before the game start then. And you have to really be pending on that Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris situation, because then those guys become elite values and potentially coming lower owned than they should.
Definitely. We got some big news coming, so stay tuned. We got Eytan and Greg taking you guys all the way up to lock tonight. Guys, if you can, while you're enjoying this amazing music, hit that thumbs up button. Give our buddies a little bit of hype going into live before lock here. And thanks for tuning in, supporting the stream and the site. Good luck tonight. Stay tuned.
Welcome in. Good evening. We got you for the next hour, another live before lock show, and a bunch of late injuries filing in right now. We got a 7-game slate for you, so you want to make sure over the next hour you listen to everything that Greg Ehrenberg has to say for you, because it's going to be jam-packed as more information keeps coming in, lineups get locked, and injuries, guys, that are out. Make sure that you subscribe, like, hit the notification bell. Definitely want to subscribe so that you don't miss anything that we're talking about as we lead you up until tip. What's happening, Greg?
A lot. I mean, so in terms of like my lineups, I can't even upload stuff to really figure out who I'm playing yet, especially because we still have injury news, especially in your part there. We've got, the Philadelphia 76ers. Maybe we could get your input on this, maybe what your lean is here, and it's something we're going to find out before the end of the show anyway, but there's so much up in the air with Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Seth Curry currently listed as questionable, and that is the first game of the slate to lock, that I feel any sort of lineup uploading I do or any kind of crunch I do, it's irrelevant because I'm going to have to change it 30 minutes from now. So you're a Philly guy. You do a lot of Philly sports radio. What do you think the Sixers' plan is here?
Let's start with the obvious, right at the top with Joel Embiid. And the biggest concern that I have is not even that he plays, but when we see him on the floor, if in fact he's a go, this really is just an indicator. This is Doc Rivers letting everybody know ahead of time, don't expect a lot of him. And that could open up things for Dwight Howard just in general. But if we already know, which is rare for the Sixers, where they're saying, look, he's going to sit just to sit, load management. They're not creating some injury. There's no twist or tweak of any body part, Greg. That's where I think they're already setting us up for more of a low minutes night. Even if it's competitive, I can't imagine that Joel Embiid is in this game. You'd probably just see more Dwight Howard because it's Detroit. So there's I think the initial fade inside me of Embiid where unless you're super confident that you can get a solid return, 50 plus points on maybe 20, 22 minutes granted against Detroit, I think he'd be a fade if he plays. And if he doesn't, then that opens up a completely different conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And right now I'm assuming that he sits. I assume Simmons sits. I assume Seth Curry sits. And that's going to make Tobias Harris somebody who I'm going to want to get to in a bunch of my lineups. Now, with that said, I was totally convinced Joel Embiid was sitting yesterday when he gets listed as questionable early in the sometime in the afternoon. And then he ends up getting ruled in right before. And I was not expecting that at all. So let's see what happens. But this is one I think even more so obvious they should rest him. It is the tail end of a back-to-back, very winnable game against the Detroit Pistons. So we'll see. The other thing also is he's self-admitted over the last couple of weeks that he's not totally healthy. He's playing through a little bit of bumps and bruises. If there's any, and also it looks like the Sixers are pretty much locked up the 1 seed at this point. Yep. Give him the night off, make it easier for us in our lineups, give us the Tobias Harris value, give us the Dwight Howard value. So I'm hoping that's the news we get, and it's definitely a reason to stick around for the show because we're going to find out before the show's over.
Without a doubt. And I think with Ben Simmons, even if he plays, he's having such a down year across the board. I don't even know how much you would trust him healthy tonight, let alone the fact that you have to now weigh in the injury and just the fact that he is, or just rest and what could be lingering over as well with Embiid. At least you're going to get productivity every single second he's out there. You can't really count on that with Simmons if he's a go.
Yeah, and the other thing too is you mentioned this before, is even let's say there's a situation where all those Sixers guys are in, right? We have Philly right now favored by 8.5 points. I think that spread would be quite a bit wider if the books were confident that all the Sixers guys were going to be in. But even if they do play, I think you made a good point before. I doubt they're going to play full minutes. It could be something like we saw the Bucks play. Was it not the Rockets game yesterday? It might have even been the Pistons recently, where they did something similar. They had some guys listed as questionable. They ended up playing everybody. And then just everybody played like 26 to 28 minutes, and it was enough for them to win, but it was not enough to spark a whole lot of fantasy upside. So it is a situation where if everybody was playing, there's other guys I'd rather pay up for, especially on the slate where we have, Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, Russell Westbrook, and all the value in the world. It's easy enough to get up to those guys. So if everybody plays for Philly, no real interest for me.
Yeah, and I'd warn people in thinking that Embiid is playing simply because he thinks he can win the MVP. That's not the motivation for them anymore. They realize that they, as you mentioned, great point about where they sit right now atop the East. If they're coming down and saying, look, young fella, you need a night off, he's going to take that night off. So we'll see, but you're right. Everything will kind of fall in there. Was there anybody you were looking at? I guess Dwight Howard, by default, right, Greg, is going to get a ton of minutes if Embiid sits. I don't know if there's anybody that's, again, appealing. Shake Milton is going to be bumped up a lot with at least minutes. I'm not sure if the usage and productivity automatically falls, but both of these guys, at least with Milton, you're going to get a cheaper price. Howard probably as soon as we know with Embiid.
Yeah, so once again, it is going to depend on which guys are in or out, but I'll bring up the 76ers numbers when we do take Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid off the court and see what some of the usage looks like in the points per minute production. Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure that Shake Milton actually leads the 76ers in usage when Simmons and Embiid are off the court. And yes, no, it's actually Tobias Harris, but only narrowly. So Tobias Harris, 30.9% usage rate when Simmons and Embiid are off the court, but Shake Milton a 30.2% usage rate with those guys off the court. So for sure, to me, the one question mark would be with Milton, how many minutes do they actually play him? But especially if he ends up starting, he's somebody I'd want to get to at a pretty high volume, considering that, like I said, 30.2% usage rate, and he scores nearly 40 fantasy points per 36 minutes without those guys on the court. So Shake Milton would definitely be the value play. Tobias Harris, the pay-up guy. And then obviously Dwight Howard, another guy to consider very strongly if Joel Embiid's out. Those three guys would all become core plays.
Same game. So I'm curious, how many lineups were ruined with the news that Christian Wood wasn't a go tonight?
Well, Christian Wood, it's not the same game. The Rockets are playing
Houston.
Jazz,
pardon me. What am I talking about? Yes.
I mean, we could talk about Houston for a second.
Yes.
And also, I want to hit on, we did just get a starting lineup for the Memphis Grizzlies, and Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to start. So that's a pretty interesting wrinkle. But the Houston
got news
Rockets,
on Brogdon too, right? Okay.
The Houston Rockets, I have no clue what to make of this team right now, because we have, Kelly Olynyk's questionable, Jayshawn Tate's questionable. Kelly Olynyk, you wouldn't be aware of this, but we talked about it before, but there was a big bet that went on the show yesterday.
I saw it on Twitter, so I at least had some context to it, but you had to explain what it was about.
And yeah, so it was, by the way, I took all kinds of crap yesterday for saying that I liked Anthony Davis as a player. Everybody's saying, he sucks, he's not healthy. Yeah, well, he only ends up scoring the second most fantasy points on the plate. Bojan Bogdanovic went absolutely berserk and scored 48 real-life points. But yeah, Anthony Davis was 2% owned and ended up being a nice GPP play. And Eric Lindquist, who maybe he's watching right now, he watches the shows a lot. If not, he usually pops when we talk about him. But being the chalk donkey that he is, he was really into Kelly Olynyk as one of the most rostered players on the slate. So I had told him that I thought Anthony Davis was going to score more fantasy points than Kelly Olynyk, and we had a little bit of bet on it, and it's going to be paid on Tuesday, the next time we do a show together. But that aside, talking about the Houston injury report for today, Kelly Olynyk.
There you go.
Got pay up. It's I know that's a little bit, that's the money time sound drop, but listen, we've got limited resources for our sound drops here. It could play many roles, but so
as long as it's not trademarked, I think you're good to go, right?
No, yeah, that's one of the reasons also we only have 6 sound drops to go to. But the injury report here for the Houston Rockets, Kelly Olynyk's questionable, Jayshawn Tate is questionable. Here are the players listed out: Kevin Porter Jr., Avery Bradley, DJ Wilson, Sterling Brown, John Wall, Christian Wood, Dante Exum, Eric Gordon, and David Nwaba, all out tonight for the Houston Rockets. So there's going to be a lot of value here, and it's a tough matchup against the Utah Jazz, except they could end up having 6 guys active and just everybody plays over 40 minutes. But once again, this is a game where I don't know who those guys are going to be. So we do have 4 games that start at 10 o'clock. So what's nice about that is I have a bunch of guys in my lineups right now, just as placeholders. I have a bunch of exposure to DJ Augustine. He's probably somebody that's going to make it into my lineups, but not as much as I have right now. But it's just a placeholder spot, and I want to be able to maneuver those lineups and make some swaps. So I'm sure that guys like DJ Augustine, Daquan Jeffries, Armani Brooks, Kenny Martin Jr., at some capacity, these guys are going to make it into my lineups, but it's going to depend on whether Olynyk and Tate end up playing.
If you mentioned Augustine, and clearly the price right there, I see him 3,700 on DraftKings. So that alone, as far as what the payout would be, is significant. But I wonder with Tate, if in fact he's a little higher of a price, 6,800 here, or pardon me, 6,600 on DraftKings. Are you playing Tate? Are you just waiting for that? Or is it still, you're going to wait and see more? Or is it, I don't know how much the cost 6,600 impacts it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's 6,600. We would need him to be in unrestricted and Kelly Olynyk to be out. And then I would say that Jayshawn Tate is a marginal play. The Rockets guys I'm going to be going for are going to be the cheaper guys if we get Tate and or Olynyk out. That's when some of those other guys I brought up would really come into play. If Olynyk and Tate both end up playing, then this is actually going to be a situation I don't have that much interest in. I just don't think that's going to be the case.
All right, make sure all the super chats you get in, anything you have here for Greg. We continue to tell you, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You want to subscribe so you don't miss a second here as we lead you up to the top. Tonight's show brought to you by OddsShopper. I'll tell you, that's where we get everything more about that throughout the show here. But, we keep looking at some of the bigger price names that we're waiting on. You mentioned as far as guys who are out now that we have definitively, I don't know how much lineups are changed or altered for you with Brogdon now being officially out.
Yeah, so we could talk about the Pacers and Brogdon and then hit on the Grizzlies starting lineup also. So here's something that I think is going a little bit overlooked by a lot of people right now is that Karis LeVert is projected for, it was very minimal ownership last look. Yes, 6% on DraftKings, and on Fanduel, LeVert is currently projected for 18% ownership. So a little bit more popular there. But the 6% ownership on DraftKings, it's not that he's somebody who I'm getting like 50% of my lineups or anything, but I'm overweight on the 6% number, and this is why. In competitive games as of late with Malcolm Brogdon out, Karis LeVert has played a massive amount of minutes. So last time out against the Atlanta Hawks, 31 minutes. The last time they played against the Wizards, and this was a game where the starters didn't even close the game because it was a blowout. He played 38 minutes. A game against the Nets, another game that was a blowout, so the starters didn't close. He played 36 minutes. So I actually think that there's a pretty good chance that in a game that's very, very important between the Pacers and the Washington Wizards, where they are in the standings right now, this is a game that's very likely to determine who's going to get home court advantage in the first part of the play-in tournament. I think we could see Karis LeVert play over 40 minutes in this game if all goes well for him, no foul trouble or anything like that, because this is a very, very high leverage game. So with that in mind, I have Karis LeVert projected really highly personally to a number that I'm almost uncomfortable with. So I'm definitely overweight to the field on Karis LeVert because the role that he's playing for this team right now and his recent minutes, and then we also consider a plus matchup against the Wizards. This game is a 248 total. I think there's a much higher ceiling on LeVert than a 6% ownership by the field suggests.
Yeah, and just looking at it, right, four of the last five, over 40, especially with minutes being a little bit more of a fluctuation up and down. That total is monstrous tonight. It dropped a little bit, but still at 248.5. So even without, looking at the impact here of Brogdon being out, clearly there's not that much of an impact on scoring. And as you mentioned, what you can get from LeVert. All right, before we go to Memphis, as you mentioned, that anything else that you can look a little deeper, as we talked a little bit beforehand with the Sixers having a couple of guys out. I don't know if there's any more trickle-down effect with Brogdon being out that's worth noting outside of LeVert.
So, I have a little bit of exposure to Aaron Holiday and Doug McDermott now, but nothing significant. And frankly, I think these are guys who are probably going to be getting pinched out of my player pool once we get Sixers news anyway. So if we find out a bunch of guys are out for Philly, then these kind of marginal value plays are guys that are only going to make into a couple of lineups of mine and nothing substantial, because I suspect we're going to get really strong value to come out before long.
All right, so I imagine with Ja and the starting lineup here, Memphis taking advantage of Toronto, who's down everybody.
Yeah, so to me, and I have to look up I just never considered Jaren Jackson Jr. at all for this slate. So I'm kind of curious to see what his price point is. He's 5,700.
We had a couple of people this morning predicting double doubles from JJ. So,
hey, he's starting, but all right. So 5,700 on DraftKings, that's a no-go for me. But on FanDuel at 5,300, especially because of the positionality there, to me, that is a price point that I'd be willing to get to Jaren Jackson Jr. He's also a better fantasy score on FanDuel than DraftKings anyway because of his defensive stats. Jaren Jackson Jr. has always been a guy who's done pretty well in terms of blocks and steals. So we have not yet seen Jaren Jackson start a game this year. We also haven't seen him play more than 25 minutes, but in general, his playing time has kind of trended upward. And considering that he did play 25 minutes last game, which is the most he played all season, I think it's reasonable to expect we get somewhere in the neighborhood of 27 to 28 minutes tonight for Jaren Jackson Jr. And then considering that for the season, and historically he's always been a guy who scores, well over a fantasy point per minute, I think we're looking at probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a little over 30 FanDuel points for Jaren Jackson Jr. at a 5,300 price tag, and not much ownership projected at the moment. Well, that's probably going to change when we get an update on that. That would make him somebody definitely to get to on FanDuel.
Is there anything that we can mine here, knowing that just from the jump, Toronto is just at such a major disadvantage from a talent standpoint, and where Memphis is just overall continuing to play and trying to get this game over as fast as possible? Looking at a guy who may normally, and I don't know if you start to go below Jackson or just around Jackson with Brooks or even Melton, somebody a little bit lower on that chain that is going to get a lot more minutes, or at least expected a lot more minutes tonight, where you can spend elsewhere.
Not for Memphis. I don't think that there's anybody really worthy of value there, especially when there's going to be so many spots elsewhere. And then, you mentioned a talent discrepancy between the team. Memphis just lost the game to Detroit. And that was a Detroit team that was resting everybody. But then also, if we're just going to look at talent discrepancy, the Utah Jazz are favored by 15.5 points tonight. The Golden State Warriors are favored by 14 points over the Thunder. We have the Philadelphia 76ers essentially resting everybody because they're playing the Detroit Pistons. Like 50% of games that we're seeing this time of year, there's a massive talent discrepancy between teams. So if we're trying to build rosters based around that, there's just too much of that to, I think, make too many strong predictions on.
Okay, so fair enough. Now, from Memphis, where else now do we look, Greg, as far as a name to keep an eye out, as far as possibly being out or just recently, even if it's someone like Ty Jerome ruled out? Jeremy Grant looks like he will play Saturday, so we can factor that in as far as another name to keep an eye on.
So Lou Dort, if he's out, that actually has somewhat of an impact to me, just because he's been somebody who's surprisingly up a lot of usage in the games he's been active for the Oklahoma City Thunder lately. We have over the last 2 months, 26% usage rate for Lou Dort. He's kind of taken over the offense ever since Shai Gilgeous-Alexander went down. So with that in mind, if he ends up being out tonight, and by the way, that's a 10 o'clock start, so there's almost no chance we're going to find out news on that during the show. But Lou Dort, if he ends up not playing, you mentioned Ty Jerome is out. We've got Alexei Pokashevsky, he's out. So that would open up a decent amount of usage in the Thunder starting lineup. And one guy who I think is an under the radar play that would make sense for me here is Moses Brown. He was killing it when he first signed that contract with the Thunder. Like, he was a guy who was like, oh my, I can't believe they did it again. Remember, they had Lou Dort is on like a 4-year contract worth $5 million total. And they signed Moses Brown to a similar contract. And he came out, he put up like a 2020 game against the Celtics in nearly the first half of that game. And he had a couple of games that were really massive like that. And then he just kind of disappeared and fell off the face of the earth. But the last 2 games for Moses Brown, he played 30 minutes and 28 minutes. If he's going to continue to play somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes and also potential for increased usage with no Ty Jerome and no Lou Dort on the court, if Dort ends up getting ruled out, then Moses Brown, I think, as a GPP play, somebody to get at least more exposure to than the field has.
All right, on the premium Slack here, Office Ninja 87 asking you, Greg, for Yahoo, Jordan Clarkson a bit chalky at 33.8%.
I'm going to bring up the Yahoo pricing really quick because it's not something I looked at, but we also have a super chat. We can get to that as I pull up the Yahoo pricing.
D. Owens 89, can you discuss the centers, right? 7 through 8 on FanDuel as well?
Yeah, so very specific price range, but let's see who the ones are that I think make the most sense here. The price, what was the price range again?
7 to 8, 5K on FanDuel.
All right, so the guys. 5. All right, so that is only 4 guys. That is Jusuf Nurkic, Jonas Valanciunas, Kelly Olynyk, who's currently questionable, and then Rudy Gobert. So for starters, Rudy Gobert, I'm pretty concerned about the amount of minutes he's actually going to end up playing today. Tail end of a back-to-back for Utah. They're also massive favorites over the Houston Rockets, so that's a concern. Kelly Olynyk, he's questionable to play right now. That's a concern. So Jonas Valanciunas, a game that Memphis really needs at this point, going up against Toronto. Memphis, who's fallen towards the bottom of the play-in standings in the Western Conference. I think that he's probably the guy who I feel the best about his playing time as of now. And I mean, that's not saying much because his minutes fluctuate a lot, but Jonas Valanciunas is also a really strong points per minute fantasy producer. And there are spots where you see him spike a really significant upside whenever he does end up getting those minutes. But considering the weight of this game and how much the Grizzlies need a win, I think Valanciunas is probably a little more likely to play over 30 minutes than he normally is. So of the guys in that price range, Valanciunas is the one I think makes for the best option.
Yeah, and I wonder if Nurkic, just the volatility in minutes, just looking 30 once over the last 5, 6, it's been a while. Granted, 29, I get it, but still, it's been a while since he's clipped 30. And is it just a matter of volatility for him, where if you knew a little more consistency, again, tonight against the Spurs team, home favorite, so maybe there is a little more minutes, but I just wonder if that's the deterrent or maybe one of the major deterrents for Nurk.
It's the tail end of a back-to-back, and then in terms of his playing time, it hasn't been big enough for me. He played over 30 minutes yesterday for the first time in a long time. But that's almost a concern for me at this point because he hadn't done it in Oh, but when's the last time Nurkic
That's what I'm
played
saying.
over
I was
30
going
minutes?
back trying to do the math in my head. That's where I see all the 29s.
So
And I had to qualify the statement with how close 29 was, but it's not 30, Greg.
So the last time he played over 30 minutes before yesterday was January 13th. And then given that they've been, fairly cautious with his workload, both in terms of playing time and then also playing on back-to-backs. I mean, the last time he played in a back-to-back was last week. He played 29 minutes in the front end of a back-to-back against the Celtics. And the tail end of the back-to-back, he only played 23 minutes. He played a back-to-back, the 27th and the 28th. He played 19 and 21 minutes in both ends of that. So I definitely have a little bit of concern in terms of how many minutes that they're going to give to Nurkic. Same concern with a lot of the guys in that price range that we just mentioned. But I feel the best of Valanciunas by a narrow margin.
It doesn't look good, at least at the moment, for Curry and Embiid, but we'll get to that. Another super chat here. Soul Dope 1234. Few questions for FanDuel. Thoughts on Westbrook for FanDuel, Greg? What studs 8K plus are you most getting to tonight on FanDuel? And good luck to you. And thanks for all the content. Thank you for all the content.
By the way, also circle back on something. Jordan Clarkson at $24 on Yahoo, and the amount of usage that he's been picking up lately, and that we've seen him play garbage time at times for the Jazz. I think that's warranted ownership and only a $24 price tag. As for Soldope's question now, I think Westbrook at 12,000. It's a little different rostering him on FanDuel versus DraftKings. Like DraftKings, I just think it's a no-brainer. You just pay up for him at 11,100. His price has not gone up nearly enough given what his production is over the last couple of months. And then he's basically a walking triple-double. I saw sportsbooks have the rebound and the assist prop both over under 13.5 for Russell Westbrook today. So, I mean, the floor and ceiling for Westbrook is so high that 11,100. I just say roster him. And then on FanDuel at 12,000, while it's a little bit more of an exorbitant price tag, it's offset by he's only getting rostered in 17% of lineups right now. So Steph Curry at 10,200 is going 36% owned. And then we have Malachi Flynn, who is one of the top value plays, but he's 25% owned. Given the ownership gap between Westbrook and those guys, and also this game matters a ton for the Wizards, I really like this spot for Russell Westbrook. Steph Curry, to me, is still a good play on FanDuel, but if I was building let's say, 20 lineups or however many Soldope is playing, I'd flip those ownerships there. I'd rather have Russell Westbrook in 35% of my lineups and then Steph Curry in 17% of lineups that Westbrook's in right now. Because the upside for Russell Westbrook is so significant that I think whenever he's low owned, you just want to be overweight to the field on the number.
Just to go on that note about ownership, and you mentioned Malachi Flynn, and I'm seeing here projected on DraftKings 34%. Augustine's right there at the top at 35%. Does his ownership become a deterrent at some point if you are playing him or thinking about playing him?
I don't know, because I don't know who's playing for the Rockets tonight. Like, I mean, because it's going to depend ultimately what I project him at. But I mean, if he's 35% owned and then Jayshawn Tate and Kelly Olynyk are both out also, then the 35% is probably justified, although the number would also go up from there. But if Tate and Olynyk both play and he's 35% owned, then the number's too high. So it's going to ultimately depend on who else is in and then what I end up projecting Augustine for. But it's just one of those things. I just don't have enough information right now, unfortunately.
No, that's fair. And I know as we kind of wait here for really the Sixers right now and trying to get some information on warmups and seeing it looked like Simmons and Curry were not out right away for warmups. So I'm waiting on a text and trying to check Twitter and everything else that comes in. But I think honestly, at this point, I'd be shocked if Simmons, Embiid, and Curry play. Is there any interest in George Hill if all three of those guys are out at such a ridiculously low price, Greg?
By the way, I'm just trying to look up the exact tweet and see what all the information is that we have right now on the Embiid situation. So
as far as his status?
Yeah, just in terms of like what the information was about them being on the court or not.
I thought it was Simmons and Curry.
Okay, here we go. All right, we just got a second. Seth Curry out, Ben Simmons out tonight.
There you go.
All right,
and still nothing official on Embiid.
Still nothing official on Embiid, which is going to.
Yeah. The only thing I could. I'm sorry.
It's just so goofy, right?
Well, that's what I mean. Like the only thing I could really see is him putting up some fight about wanting to be out there for numbers because somebody in his camp is still selling him that at plus 550 or whatever he is on the futures, he can win the MVP. But I don't even believe that following and covering this team. So I don't know what the holdup is at this point, but if you got him in, you got Detroit in at one point earlier in the day at 10.5, you might like that locked in earlier.
All right, so let's start with this. Let's just live in a scenario, and I'm going to go through these numbers, and then okay. MB is going to get ruled out like 30 seconds later. But
no, I think it's worth it.
I ran a query here just to see what the numbers for the 76ers look like when we just take Ben Simmons and Seth Curry off the lineup, out of the lineup. Joe Embiid without those guys on the court, 42.5% usage rate, scores 66.25 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. So if we are actually going to have a scenario where Embiid plays and those guys sit, Embiid's going to be somebody I really want to get a lot of exposure to, especially because his current ownership projection is 14% on Fanduel. That would be too low with these guys out. And on DraftKings, he's projected for 2% ownership. If those numbers, they're gonna change now. But if it's anywhere in the neighborhood of being the same, then Embiid's a really, really strong GPP play.
Yeah, and I wonder just how many people look at Embiid and think, oh, well, he's already coming in questionable. These guys are out. Stay away from him because he's only going to play 20 minutes. And it's twofold. One, again, depending on how the game flows, he may get high 20s. And also, he's like we've seen, right?
We just got the starting lineup.
Oh, so
all
he's
right,
in?
Sixers starting lineup. Tyrese Maxey. So it's Maxey, Green, Thibault, Harris, and Embiid.
Wow.
So Embiid is playing.
Wow. Maxey's going to play a lot. I know Rivers wants to get as many minutes as humanly possible from Maxey before they get into the playoffs. So you can take that for what it's worth, especially with him in the starting lineup tonight, Greg.
Yeah, and let's see. With Maxey, I assume that his price tag is probably close to the min. And the other thing also that's nice about Maxey is something that you mentioned right there. That helps a lot. It's just that Doc Rivers wants to play in bigger minutes heading into the playoffs. But the other thing, too, is let's say there's this scenario where Embiid just goes nuclear. They absolutely smash the Pistons. Maxey's playing in garbage time.
Absolutely.
So his minutes are pretty secure no matter what the game script is. And it's a favorable matchup no matter what the game script is. So to me, Tyrese Maxey, 3,400 on DraftKings. And then on FanDuel, we have Maxey at, let's see, I assume that he's probably... that's on DraftKings though, but FanDuel,
I'm sorry. I apologize.
3,900. Either way, that's going to be a very strong play for me on both sites.
Yeah, and that's not going away. So if you're looking at Maxey big picture over the final week of the season, I can tell you that one bad game, two bad games, that's not going to be a deterrent. Rivers is going to have Maxey out there as much as humanly possible, especially and that's so key too, is that I can't even tell you that Shake Milton is going to be out there in garbage time, but I can promise you that they could be up by 40 and Tyrese Maxey will still be out there. So definitely keep an eye on that. That's a good call.
Yeah, so I am going to start rerunning my lineups. Now, and by the way, this was information I actually needed to make lineups. I had everything reserved, but to me, it was like what's the point? I'm going to have to adjust it for the Sixers news. Now we actually know. And by the way, just to reiterate, I know a lot of people are probably trolling in the chat when they bring it up and just say who's playing. Embiid's starting, and then we have Ben Simmons is out, Seth Curry's out. So the starting lineup for the Philadelphia 76ers is Maxey, Green, Thibault, Harris, and Embiid.
Yeah, I'd stay away. Anything from a betting standpoint of Danny Green, because he's not going to be out there much at all tonight. But that starting lineup, and I guess Harris, again, is going to be a conversation because we now have it definitively. And we talked about guys like Maxey and Milton lower end, but where is Tobias Harris in factoring in a lineup that you can build with all the other information coming down with the Sixers?
Yeah, so Joel Embiid is certainly the higher priority play. Tyrese Maxey is a higher priority play. But still, I mean, if you look at Tobias Harris's numbers this year with Simmons and Curry off the court, 29.7% usage rate. He scores 44 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. So Tobias Harris is still someone I'm going to want to get to, just not with the same regularity that I'm going to be getting to these other Sixers guys.
All right, we get another super chat up here. Reminder, tonight's show brought to you by OddsShopper. It's where we go, everything up to date and everything betting. Continue to tell you as far as all the betting stuff that I do off here of Awesemo. This is now my home for all of the most up-to-date odds as things shift, as things move, injury, everything that comes in. And Awesemo Plus, especially here, is what we're doing for all of the NBA shows. You can just jump in the weekly package at $29.95. But if you wanted to streamline, scale it down a little bit, simply for the DFS, NBA, at least NBA DFS, Awesemo Plus NBA Weekly is $16.95. And then the weekly express package for the NBA is just $4.95. You're going to get tons of great access to all of the premium tools, what we're using here, what Greg is using to update, to build, and all of the optimizers that we have available to you from Alex. So make sure $29.95 all the way down to the express package at $4.95. All right, now as we have some more things pile in, I'm curious, just going back to what you said, Greg, about building the lineup and everything that's locked in. Where are a couple of your moves now, knowing what you have with the Sixers to kind of trickle in elsewhere?
Yeah, so I mean, the big thing here is now that Tyrese Maxey opens up as a value play, this really changes the outlook of my lineups a ton. Like, I was already getting to Russell Westbrook a lot, but now it's really easy to fit multiple stars into the same lineup. So what actually impacts my lineups the most is now I'm getting to a lot of Jokic, especially because I thought I was going to be getting to some of Dwight Howard before. Obviously, that's not the case now, but it's really easy to fit two stars into the same lineups now. So I have a lot of exposure to both Russell Westbrook and Nikola Jokic in the same lineups. I don't really see that as massively problematic from a lineup construction point of view.
All right, our Kathleza on the super chat. Goga been getting minutes besides Sabonis.
So he's going to, let's see, I'm going to bring up his minutes from the last couple of games, and I don't have him projected significant in this spot. I have him playing 14 minutes today, so he's going to get on the court, but there's so many good value plays right now that it's really hard for me to think that he's going to play all that much. So the last two games for Goga Bitadze, he played 21 minutes against the Kings, but also that was a blowout where the starters didn't play at the end of the fourth quarter. And then against the Hawks, he played 14 minutes. So I tend to think he's going to play close to those 14 minutes again. That's what I gave him for tonight, is 14 minutes. And given that we now have, Tyrese Maxey is a really strong value play, whoever ends up being playing for the Rockets later on, it's not somebody to get to.
Now, on the flip side, I know that there were so many injuries here. We're still kind of, I guess, waiting, right, for Corey Joseph. Jeremy Grant is in. Is there anything now, knowing what's happening with the Sixers, that you could slide or maybe get a little edge in with Detroit, or even a good solid value play?
I don't know yet, because we still have Corey Joseph is questionable and Wayne Ellington is questionable. If both of those guys are out, then maybe Killian Hayes starts and we could expect him to play a whole bunch of minutes. But as of right now, with Corey Joseph and Wayne Ellington both questionable, that is a little hard for me to say.
Would you run Milton? I did see this, and I'm curious, just from my own personal standpoint, watching this team and playing a couple of guys tonight based off what you're saying. Could you run Milton and Maxey in the same lineup, like super value lineup, and just build around?
Yeah, I don't have Milton as a high priority play. I mean, he is in my player pool, but only I have him. Let's see, he was in between 5 and 10%. So I think he's a good pivot play off of Tyrese Maxey. Maxey's going to be a lot more popular as the starter. But I mean, if you look at the numbers for Milton this year with Simmons and Seth Curry off the court, we have Shake Milton 29.6% usage rate, scores 38 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. The question for me just becomes, how many minutes does Shake Milton actually play? And it's something that's been very variant the entire season and is hard to nail down. So I'm taking a few GPP flyers on Shake Milton, but not enough certainty in the playing time for me to make him like a core play.
Right at the top, is Russell Westbrook locked in across the board for you?
No, but he's one of my most rostered players. There's nobody on the slate that's going to be a lock for me.
So is it just a matter of sprinkling out? When you talk about your most rostered players tonight, is it a matter of just sprinkling out Jokic? It's got like Jokic, Curry, Westbrook from that, maybe Dame?
No, I don't really have that much exposure to Dame, but in terms of, because people always ask me, I'll get these DMs on Twitter, who are you locking today? And the reason that it's hard to do that on a slate like this is there's a lot of good plays. So if I'm playing, obviously, if I was playing 3 lineups, then yeah, there's guys who are locks, but That's not the case for me. And I'm playing 20 lineups today. A lot of times I play more than 20 lineups. But with that in mind, there's a whole bunch of value plays to get to. We have the Rockets guys. We have Maxey. We have Malachi Flynn. Then in terms of pay-up options, Westbrook, Jokic. I want to get to Embiid now. So there's so many guys that I think are good plays that it's hard for me to say to any one guy like, oh, this guy needs to be in every single one of my lineups. Maxey would be the closest right now, though.
Have you taken advantage or at least tried to look ahead of time, knowing, of course, that on the flip side, Houston still waiting, but at the same point, we talked about that large spread, the talent discrepancy, backcourt out, right, continued for Utah. Mentioned Clarkson as far as on Yahoo, but I don't know if there was anyone else, even as a pivot, that you can play on Utah.
Yeah, so I don't really have guys I like on Utah today.
Yeah, you mentioned to stay away from Gobert in that center conversation.
It's just an issue of they're favored by 15.5 points. It's a really favorable matchup against the Rockets, but there's just other guys I'd rather pay up for. So there were, like Jordan Clarkson, it's different on Yahoo because he's $24. So that's a much different salary strength than him being $7,600 on DraftKings and $7,300 on Fanduel. Early in the day, I thought I might have liked Jordan Clarkson. We've got a bunch of guys to play now. And this is happening to me all the time at this point of the season where there's a bunch of guys kind of in the mid-tier, maybe upper mid-tier of pricing that I think early in the day look like good plays. And then as more value comes out, it just becomes so much easier to turn those Jordan Clarksons into, a Russell Westbrook or a Steph Curry or something like that when you're actually building lineups, that the salary constraints just don't matter that much. And then I tend to not really get to a lot of those guys because my lineups just all become stars and scrubs.
Got it. Oh, okay. So that's what I was trying to figure out, especially we mentioned as far as just at the top paying for a guy like Steph in relation to the other big name guys that you would be paying for right there at the top of the list. And then, Draymond Green slides in there at 7,800. I see on DraftKings. So if you're not paying for Steph tonight, are you looking at another maybe value play, or even if you think it's in a little bit of an overpay for Draymond at 7,800 to see on DraftKings?
Oh no, I like Steph Curry tonight.
Okay. No, I know you did. I'm just saying, like in a lineup that you didn't, because I know you're saying you were sprinkling around no locks. I didn't mean to insinuate that you did, Greg. I'm sorry. I just meant in a lineup that you were not playing a specific lineup. Let's say that you were not playing Steph. Would you look at Draymond or somebody else on OKC, or pardon me, on Golden State going up against OKC?
Let's see. Let me look at some of my exposures here and see if there's anybody else from Golden State that I'm getting to at this point. No, not really. But this is really a factor of, so somebody like Draymond Green, he's in the same boat as somebody like Jordan Clarkson. If you're just looking at points per dollar, Draymond Green, sure, he's fine. He's somebody who I think is going to score probably more likely than not a little over 40 fantasy points at a price point, like you said there, at 7,800. Points per dollar on most slates, that's fine. On this slate, there is a whole bunch of value, and it isn't that hard to get up to the more expensive guys. So it's hard for me to prioritize Draymond Green when I just don't think he's a great play compared to the other options we have to pay up for.
Another super chat here. AB asking Flynn, Jokic, or Embiid Morant in a FanDuel cash.
Let me pull that up. So I have Flynn and Jokic, or
Flynn
Embiid.
We have right there at the top, right?
That would be Malachi Flynn and Nikola Jokic for me.
Without a doubt. No hesitation.
No, I am pretty good with that.
If Flynn just alone, right? I mean, we've mentioned him kind of at the beginning, just looking and taking advantage of the pricing and how outside of Siakam, nobody else is there. But what about Siakam in relation to the pricing at 9,000 on DraftKings and maybe looking at him as a pay up? I would think 8,900 on FanDuel.
Yeah, so to me, Siakam is a good pay-up option. He scored over 70 DraftKings points in 2 of his last 3 games. And you just look at the injury report right now for the Toronto Raptors also, where they have Kyle Lowry's out, Chris Boucher's out, OG Anunoby's out, Fred VanVleet's out, Paul Watson's out, and Aaron Baines is out. So the minutes for Siakam, as much as the Raptors are kind of tanking at this point in the year, I mean, the guys who are on the court, they're still playing to win. They're just holding a lot of guys out. But listen to the playing time for Siakam over the last 4 games. 40 minutes, 39 minutes, 42 minutes, 42 minutes. Last game was an overtime game, but even so, usage rate over 32% each of the last 3 games. So I have Siakam projected for over 50 fantasy points today. So with that in mind, even at this price point, that's maybe a little higher than we're used to seeing for Siakam, given how many guys are out and what his recent role is, I think that he should be priced, probably like $500, $800 more.
So I ask only because, I'm looking at where you pull up minutes and addressing at least the productivity that we've got from him. But the one consistency in this is that those are close games. Is there a concern, especially knowing that at 9,000 or 8,900 DraftKings, Fanduel, respectively, Greg, that you really need that level of productivity to return from Siakam, and he just, because they're getting pounded into the dust with guys that he may not even recognize around him, may not play as much?
No, because it's hard for me to say that this game is going to be a blowout when the spread is only 6.5 points. Like, to me, I just assume a relatively competitive game at that point. For instance, the Wizards-Pacers game is a 4-point spread. That's not significantly different than the Memphis game. The Sixers game has a 9-point spread. The Warriors game is a 14-point spread. The Utah game is a 15.5-point spread. If I'm just removing any game that I think has any remote chance of being a blowout, I'm left with, like, what would be my player pool? I'm left playing nothing but, Nets Nuggets tonight. Like, there's a lot of games at this point in the season that don't have, all that close of spread. So it's something I can't really be too concerned over.
All right, make sure you make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you never miss a second of what's going on here. Also want to remind you about this fantastic thing we're doing. It's all about you at the Awesemo Hall of Fame, where you yourself can go out and brag across the world, and make sure that you download, first and foremost, the Awesemo pick, the profile pick from awesemo.com/avatar. We love just seeing all the different slides of all these gigantic wins. And then from there, you can tweet your wins once you do it at Awesemo HOF, and place in the top 3 with a contest of over 5,000 contestants. You win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. It's amazing just to continue to see this. And I thought I saw you in one of these slides earlier in the day. Is that right? Did you have one of these big 100K wins that we were bragging about, or did I miss that, Greg?
If I won $100,000, I certainly missed it. So,
would you be here the next day?
Yeah, for sure. I've had a few significant DFS wins, but I have not won $100,000. I know a lot of my friends and a lot of people who work here have, but no, I would still show up the next day. It wouldn't make a difference.
But see, this is the difference, right? Like, you ask that question in general to somebody who's working a job that it's not directly related to winning money. You want to show up the next day so you can remind the world, hey, everything I told you yesterday, last night, not only did it hit, but it hit $100,000 worth. So absolutely, you'd be here to remind us.
I personally really wouldn't for that. Like, if I won $100,000, then yeah, I would be excited and I would certainly tweet about it, but I'm not really wired quite like that. Like, I would care. All right. So I care more that Anthony Davis scored more fantasy points than Kelly Olynyk last night for my stupid bet with Eric. Then, like, I cared way more about that than my lineups. Like, obviously it mattered for my lineups anyway, because I was way overweight to the field on Anthony Davis, who was only 2% owned by the field. But to me, like, I was way more invested in that than any money I had in play yesterday. Cause that's kind of like, that's how I'm wired in my competitiveness.
Okay. But to be fair, you didn't win $100,000 with that bet, right?
I still would have cared more about Anthony Davis that scored Kelly Olynyk.
I trust you about you over me. Trust me. I no problem with that. Hey, you mentioned that the late game, and clearly we have a couple of hours still until we get to the Brooklyn-Denver game, but definitely it's going to be a close one, regardless of, anticipation coming into it, and clearly a lot with Jokic. But we really didn't talk about how you're looking at Durant and Irving tonight.
I don't have exposure to them right now. So obviously they have upside. They're Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, except there are other guys who I'm prioritizing just a lot more than them on this slate. Joel Embiid, now that we have news on him already, Nikola Jokic and Russell Westbrook are guys who are really high priority plays. But the issue to me when we're talking about the Nets guys is just they don't quite stack up in terms of fantasy upside compared to the Russell Westbrooks, Nikola Jokic's, and Steph Curry's. And the other thing also that's significant here is that salary is no longer a concern for us. We have so many cheap guys to play that it isn't hard to find the extra salary to get up from Kyrie Irving to a Russell Westbrook or Steph Curry. And for that, minor price difference, when I have both those guys project for, like 10 to 15 more fantasy points than Kyrie, it's just kind of a no-brainer decision for me.
The premium Slack Swanson 79 asking you, Greg, Watanabe versus Maxey is value or both on DraftKings, and thanks for all that you do.
Yeah, right now the answer to me is both. I'm assuming that Watanabe is going to end up starting now that he's in the lineup. Where this is going to change for me in terms of my exposure to Watanabe is if Stanley Johnson starts and Watanabe comes off the bench. Then I'm going to lower my exposure to Watanabe. But right now, Maxey and Watanabe are both in a lot of my lineups.
Chris Thomason on the super chat, Danny Green or Thibault on Fanduel. And well, you really are hoping that Danny Green is playing some minutes that I don't know if he's going to get tonight.
Yeah, so one thing that's really nice about Thibault as a DraftKings specific play, I have exposure to him as a FanDuel specific play, I have exposure to him on DraftKings also, but what makes him a better play on FanDuel is you could get a game from Thibault where he goes out, he has like 2 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and then like 3 steals and 3 blocks. And that's a massively different game on FanDuel than DraftKings, where the defensive stats are worth 3 points each. So Thibault is one of the best individual perimeter defenders in the league. We see him pile up defensive stats in a hurry. So I think his upside on FanDuel is significantly higher than his DraftKings upside.
Yeah, and just staying away from Danny Green in general here. I mean, I know that he may look appealing as far as like, okay, he's a starter and a couple of the other starters are out, but I wouldn't trust him even if Embiid is out. I just don't know how much he's going to play.
So, I mean, that depends if it's going to be a blowout or not. But I don't generally roster I don't generally oh, by the way, we did get a starting lineup for the Toronto Raptors that I missed. Came out 10 minutes ago. And Watanabe is starting. It's Malachi Flynn, Gary Trent Jr., Watanabe, Siakam, and Burke. So yeah, Watanabe, very, very strong value play. Him and Maxey are the two top value plays on the slate. But getting back to Danny Green, I very rarely get a lot of exposure to him just because he's so reliant on 3-point shooting. He doesn't do a whole lot else. And so, yeah, there's always going to be games where Danny Green goes, 7 of 9 from 3. But if he doesn't do that, he generally doesn't have a whole bunch of DFS upside.
All right, on the Raptors starting lineup, one name that we didn't talk about now that it's locked in, but Gary Trent Jr., do you have any eyes on him tonight?
Less so than I thought I was going to have earlier. But, I mean, he's somebody who just all the amount of value that opened up. So he's a stronger FanDuel play than DraftKings, but I have him in, let's see, about 10% of my lineups right now, just because there's so many guys that I'm getting to for cheap that it's easy enough to just go stars and scrubs. And I have Watanabe projected for more fantasy points than Danny Green. I have Maxey projected than Gary Trent. I have Maxey projected for more fantasy points than him now. I have Watanabe not projected for more fantasy points, but in a close enough neighborhood to where that price difference definitely helps me to be able to get up to other stars. So just where he's priced $5,500 on DraftKings, $5,000 on FanDuel, he's a better play on FanDuel than DK, except once again, there's just enough value that my lineups are pretty much all stars and scrubs.
All right, again on the premium Slack, DK Priest on that similar vein, Levert and Gordon or Watanabe and Siakam in a FDGPP.
I have to bring up it's hard for me to just remember here we go. Levert and Gordon or Watanabe and Siakam.
Yeah, sorry.
That's the Siakam side.
Just because of Siakam carrying that?
That's a big reason why. But then also Aaron Gordon has been terrible for a really long time now with Denver.
Yeah. No argument there. All right, let's just go back now. We have a couple of minutes before everything locks in with the 3 games, right? Even at 7:30, if you want to count that. So looking back at everything, Joel Embiid was the big play, right? Knowing, of course, that you could build lineups around that. Is there anything new in the last couple of minutes that has popped in? We'll get to Kyle Frank's super chat, but I just want to make sure, just looking back, as more information came in, Greg, over the last 15, 20 minutes, if we've missed or just to go over a pretty good nugget or two that you had.
No, I think everything that was important from a news angle we've covered at this point.
Okay, fair enough. That's the big thing. And you streamlined that answer as how I should have asked that question. So Kyle Frank on the super chat, top 3 plays on FanDuel if you're only playing one lineup tonight.
Let's see. So at this point, the guys who I would prioritize the most on FanDuel, And then, I mean, there's a couple different ways to go with this, right? Like, is it just overall best points per dollar plays for a cash game? Is it who are the best GPP plays? I'm just going to answer it as the guys who I think overall, just the best plays, not even considering any sort of ownership, just the best overall projected plays. One of them would have to be Michael Porter Jr., just because the small forward position is so much different on FanDuel than it is on DraftKings. And also Michael Porter Jr., $1,700 cheaper on FanDuel than he is on DK. So he'd be somebody that's pretty important for me. Pascal Siakam at 8,900, and then Tyrese Maxey now at 3,900.
Yeah, Maxey, again, that was something that we were talking about first part of the show and then kind of reinforced with the lineups coming in. Just looking at anybody potentially high-priced guys, and we talked about right there at the top, especially like from DraftKings, right? Westbrook, Jokic, Curry, and Embiid clearly there. So I'm just wondering, guys in that top tier, if there are any auto fades for you tonight, like, nope, I'm staying as far away from them as humanly possible, regardless of a lineup I can build.
Let me look at my exposure right now.
I mean, you mentioned that you didn't have much exposure to Dame, right?
Yeah, that's true. So, I mean, I don't have
Brooklyn guys too.
I don't have exposure to, it depends where the cutoff is, but yeah, I don't have exposure to Dame tonight.
Oh, you can take it as low as you'd like. It's your world,
okay.
man. You know, absolutely. There's no wrong answer. I promise.
So Damian Lillard has played better as of late. There was a little while where he really struggled when CJ McCollum and Jusuf Nurkic were both coming back. And even though he's played better, his price has gone up to a point where I don't really know what the significant upside is in Dame, unless he's just going to have, one of his really crazy type games. But it's been so long since we've seen him do that. The last time he had over 60 fantasy points was March 16th. And before then, even over the last week where he's played better, all his games are in between 50 and 59 DraftKings points. And given the considerable upside we have in guys like Russell Westbrook, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid with the other Sixers guys out, I don't think that the upside for Damian Lillard compares to those guys. And I don't think it's all that likely it lands in the optimal lineup. So, but I don't have exposure to Dame. I don't really think that Durant or Kyrie make for particularly great plays on this slate. So I'm just going all the way up to the top. And then some of the guys who are a few $100s cheaper, just their salary savings don't do very much for me today.
Is there a scenario, and I don't know as far as the exposure with Beal, but is there a scenario where you can roster that backcourt tonight?
Which backcourt?
As far with Washington and take Russ and Beal.
So
I mean, you're paying a lot. I get it.
I mean, to me with Bradley Beal, his upside also has been really capped by how well Russell Westbrook has played as of late. So earlier in the year, we saw a bunch of big games from Beal, and that was when Westbrook was struggling. But since then, we've come to find out that Russell Westbrook was playing through a torn quad earlier in the season. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Russell Westbrook took, I think it was like 2 or 3 games off or something like that in the middle of the season. And then after that, he came back and he played significantly better from a fantasy perspective. And I think it's just because he was not healthy at the start of the year. Now he is healthy, and that's why he's playing really well. And there's a negative correlation between him and Bradley Beal, right? It's unless there's a game that goes to overtime or double overtime, or if just this game against the Pacers, the final score is like 170 to 160 or something like that. It's really hard to envision a scenario where Russell Westbrook scores 70 fantasy points and Beal goes out and scores, 60 or something like that, because it's really hard to do when Russell Westbrook is so ball dominant that there just hasn't been very many assists or other peripheral stats for Bradley Beal. So I'm going to bring up his box score really quickly. I mean, he's still scoring the ball fine. He's second in the league in scoring behind Steph Curry. But if you look at the other stats, they just haven't really been there for him. So assists for Bradley Beal, the last time he had more than 5 assists, or the last time he's had more than 5 assists twice in the last month and a half. And there were games where he had 6 assists. Rebounds, he hasn't had more than 5 rebounds in 3 weeks. So you're really, really reliant on scoring for Bradley Beal. And it's like, sure, if he's going to go out and score, 50 to 60 points, then he could get there. But the peripheral stats aren't significant enough for him to have enough of an upside alongside Westbrook.
Yeah, as far as we talked about, right, with Dame and less exposure there with Portland in that backcourt. I don't know where it is as far as that cutoff. McCollum lands on that. And then on the flip side, a guy in DeRozan, I imagine, is not somebody that you're trusting just looking at it. 2 of the last 3 games, barely hitting 40 points minutes aside, with that one blip in the radar. So I don't know how much you're trusting a guy like DeRozan versus even exposure that you have from McCollum.
By the way, here a super chat that I want to read because we've got like 30 seconds until.
Go
by
ahead.
The way,
that's more important than mine. Go ahead.
This isn't even that significant. This isn't that important of a super chat, but I'm a Tulsa dog. He's asking, would you rather trust a take from Drop Roses on Drew Lock or Josh on Ben Simmons? Asking for a friend. Josh on Ben Simmons, because Drop Roses, Drew Lock could be out of the league in 2 years, and Drop Roses will pop in the chat, and he will be convinced that a team is going to sign Drew Lock and like win the Super Bowl or something that year. So
where does that love come from for Drew Lock? Is he related?
You would think so, based on some of his comments in the in the YouTube chat. He's the world's biggest stan of Drew Lock for sure.
Okay, just fair enough. Look, if you're that blinded to pop up and suggest that Lock is a Super Bowl quarterback, then there must be either blood or maybe money. Maybe it's a burner account for his agent. Do we know anything about Lock?
I think it might be Drew Lock for all we know. Like I think it could be Drew Lock pops up in the YouTube chat every day when we're doing football shows on Sunday morning. Just like, guys, come roster me. I think it's some sort of like under the radar thing. He's trying to boost his own ability to sign a bigger contract. So that would be my guess anyway. It would make more sense than just he really likes because it just doesn't make sense to somebody who just like Drew Lock. So I'm gonna say it's probably a burner.
Fair enough. All right. Good luck, everybody. Thanks again for riding with us. Another Live Before Lock show. Make sure you follow Greg on Twitter at Ehrenberg DFS. I'm at Shander Show. Thanks, Tyler. Have a great night.